paint rainbows when the spring comes, and children will dance and smile in the music of my colors. I will shape clouds when the summer comes, and children will chant and dream in the melody of my creations. I will revolve seasonally when my death comes, and children will remember and share their heart songs, celebrating the gifts in the circle of life. I will whistle winds when the fall comes, and children will listen and hum in the understanding of leaves. I will jingle stars when the winter comes, and children will laugh and believe in the ballads of the season. I will revolve seasonally when my death comes, and children will remember and share their heart songs, celebrating the gifts in the circle of life. And children will remember and share their heart songs, celebrating the gifts in the circle of life.
Action on Saints for Give Us This Day, which is published by Liturgical Press. At age 19, Robert began working at the Catholic Worker, where he became managing editor of its publication and where he became very close to Servant of God Dorothy Day. Robert is the editor of 6 volumes of her writings and is a founding member of the Dorothy Day Guild. Meghan Jones is a disabilities advocate and leader. She is a board member of Up County Community Resources and vice chairperson of the board for the Maryland Developmental Disabilities Council. Meghan, who has Down syndrome, also works 2 jobs and serves as a lecturer, usher, and altar server at her parish. Meghan recently met with Maryland Governor Wes Moore and has testified before the Maryland legislators. Mary Donovan is director of the Guild and also a retired teacher who worked as a substitute teacher, classroom teacher, and assistant principal at the Archdiocese of Washington Catholic Schools for many years. Mary and her family got to know Jeni and Mattie as parishioners at Most Holy Rosary Parish in Prince George's County, Maryland, and she and her family are founding members of the Guild. So tonight, we take a look at the Mosaic of Mattie and his legacy being carried forthward for hope and peace and for our faith. Jeni, how are we set? Are you ready?
We are ready. I apologize. I didn't get the recording started until late, but I'll splice things together. And let me share my screen and see if this works. Hopefully everybody can see that. And I am now going to share my presentation. Maybe, there we go. So we're good. Everybody can see, we're all good.
Yes.
Okay. So hello, everybody. And aside from the technical challenges of this evening, which are unusual for me, but entirely possible, I would say we've had a lovely webinar series where we've been exploring Mattie's life, his deep faith, his love of the Eucharist, his service as a catechist and a lector, his passion to share hope and peace. Across all these sessions, we have chatted about the messages he shared. We've considered his choices, the choices Mattie made in how he thought and spoke and gently touched the world, and how the essence of his existence has grown and is growing into a spiritual legacy that continues to inspire children and adults around the world. People who are seeking or needing or celebrating heart songs and hope and those important matters he talked about of peace and purpose and play and the power of prayer. What we have learned is that in many ways, Mattie was an ordinary child. He loved stuffed animals and Legos and reading and sports, and he much appreciated time with his mom and his friends. He was both witty and wise. What we also learned is that in other ways, Mattie was a very unique young man. He had an understanding of things way beyond his years. He knew God in a very personal way, and he was deeply spiritual beyond his religious devotion as a confirmed Catholic. He was indeed both passionate and purposeful. Mattie knew God's presence in our world in a powerful way, but he also heard God speaking into his heart in a very personal way, placing messages of hope and peace, which Mattie believed was his purpose on earth, to take those messages and share them with his life, his words, and to share them with people around the world of all ages and abilities and faiths and beings, so that anybody could hear and understand the message of God. Mattie called these messages, these truths, heart songs. He shaped and shared them into poems and essays, psalms and prayers. He wove them into media interviews and presentations and everyday conversations, so that he literally amplified every opportunity that he had to express his mission, his service, to be faithful to God and to fulfill what he believed was God's gift of purpose for him, which was to be a messenger. Now, I have to be honest, it was hard for me to understand how my child, my little boy, Mattie, heard God in his heart. It was actually unsettling for me. Well, on one hand, I worried that he would be teased. Not many children or even adults are out at school or on the playground talking about Jesus and what Jesus would think or do. And I didn't want my son to be judged or hurt when he was sharing all of these messages. I also worried that if Mattie really was hearing God in his heart, well, he has this disability, perhaps he's close to death. And I didn't want doctors to give up on him. I didn't want them to pull back on his medical care thinking, oh, well, he's getting close to death. So for most of Mattie's life, and even for some years after his death, I kept these truths fairly private. I discussed them only with my pastor, with spiritual confidants, and with trusted friends. For all of Mattie's life, though, and even now, 20 years after his passing, I was and I am in what I would call reverent awe of my son's relationship with God, of his choice, his courage, his commitment to fulfill God's plan and purpose for his life, a life that Mattie knew would be filled with pain and would be brief in length. I was and am in awe and respect also of the clear differences in how Mattie spoke and wrote. On the one hand, there's these childish musings, you know, those writings that mommy's going to put up on the refrigerator for just a little while, or those silly chit chats that we'd have that would leave me amused and sometimes even amazed. But these were all very, very distinct from what I would say were prophetic and passionate writings and prayers and conversations and interviews, and the things that he said and wrote that expressed a very rich fabric of faith and offered very clear statements on very complex and abstract matters, expressions that moved spiritual wonderings on faith, on hope, on peace, into understandable, meaningful, believable, practical, even personal truths. Mattie wanted to help us all understand that we each and we all are created of love, with purpose, and for community. He wanted to help us realize and embrace our individual and our collective heart songs, our purposes. Now, when he's talking about hope and peace and God's messages for the world, Mattie often used the metaphor of Mosaic to explain how he believed God beheld humanity. He also used the Mosaic image to express his own thoughts and choices that cultivated pathways to peace. Mattie recognized that conflict was and is and ever will be inevitable. We're going to disagree. We're going to have insecurities. We're going to have desires. We have personalities. We have preferences. But we don't need to resort to violence, vengeance, vindictive judgment. So in everything that Mattie said, he's reminding us that peace is not an absence of conflict, but an attitude and an acceptance that guides deliberate choices and that should guide our just, and I mean just as in righteous, our just use of our gift of free will. Mattie explains that peace begins when we can say, I am okay. I am okay with who and how I am as a person, even with my differences, with my challenges, and ever with the purpose that was given to me by God. Mattie would go on to say that such okayness is rooted in tending to basic needs, the basic needs of the body and the mind and the spirit. And these are age-old truths. This is nothing new. But he reminded us that these age-old truths necessitate kindness, acceptance, humility, all the virtues that we talk about, and especially a focus on otherness. Mattie began using these Mosaic metaphors when he was quite young. But I have to tell you, he was quite delighted, even excited, when he began to realize that there was also spiritual symbolism in this beautiful art that he loved. By the time he penned his final book, it's called Just Peace, A Message of Hope, Mattie had a more synthesized understanding of this imagery that helps him connect the dots, really from God to Moses, to Jesus, to St. Paul, to other spiritual leaders, and then to his own life as a messenger for his creator. He wrote this book and actually divided it into 3 sections. The Mosaic exists, the Mosaic shattered, and rebuilding the Mosaic. And in one part of the book, he writes of his amazement when he had an aha moment. And it was during his, I'm going to say his gazillionth time he was reading the Exodus story, that those passages that tell of God's grace and love as God is helping to lead people forthward, and then as God is guiding with commandments that he's offering to help people, to help them live well, of love, with purpose, in community as we're created. And in the book, he writes the following. In the Old Testament of the Bible, a man known as Moses calls out to his creator, his supreme being, his God, and asks, "By what name shall I call you?" The translation of the response to Moses was profound in simplicity. I am. Think about it, Mattie writes. I am. Not I was, not I will be, not I would if I could, Not I might if someone else does something first. Not even I should. Simply, I am. Well, for Mattie as a child, he literally wanted to shout this from mountaintops. He wanted to just go out yelling, I am, we are. We're created in God's image. God is good. We are good. We're created of love with purpose, community. It's that simple. He wanted to shout, love is not conditional on what others do or don't do. Purpose is not dependent on abilities in the body or the mind. Community is not contingent on similarities in how we look or think or play or even pray. This was what Mattie believed was the essence of the Mosaic message expressed in Exodus, which reveals the essence of God's name and identity and the presence of God. I am. Mattie was even more excited when he had another aha moment during his gazillionth reading of St. Paul's letter, in which St. Paul is writing about many parts, one body, and that it is the many parts that make up the one body, and every part has a purpose, to each a talent, a reason for being, and some plan that connects all the parts into one whole, and the whole is only complete with every part. Well, he just loved this. And he would talk about how many parts may look similar. They may have similar purpose, but each is actually unique in existence, in being, in that ability to say, I am, which becomes we are when we connect those dots and when we live gently in every moment of God's truth. Mattie called this the Mosaic of Humanity, and he reminds us that every person past, every person present, every person in the future is a treasured and uniquely essential part of the whole creation. Our individual heart songs, he said, are jewels, they're treasures, they're precious gifts created by God, intended to be shared, to be given with love, to be offered with purpose, to be united with community. Mattie reminds us that heart songs are not to be compared, not to be measured by strength or length of living, but simply to be united in harmony with every other treasure. And yes, in a mosaic, some pieces are foreground and some are background. Some pieces make up the edges and the corners, and some are more central. Some pieces are new and bright and glorious, and some are old and broken and weary. And while not all pieces in a mosaic have to touch each other, all pieces are essential to the whole. So in poems and essays and psalms and prayers, in those media interviews and the presentations and in his everyday conversations, Mattie would encourage us to consider that this is how God created us in his image, an almighty mosaic, expressed in gazillions and gazillions of human treasures, and that this is how God loves us, with grace, with guidance, with presence, and with purpose. And this is how God envisions us, even as we are at times shattered, and even as at times we shatter. God ever sees us and ever sees creation with potential, with the gift of free will that empowers us to be able to choose peace, to tend to shattered and scattered mosaic remnants, and to reverently, gently, deliberately shift and shape each mosaic treasure and move prayerfully forthward with hope and with peace. God is love. We are created in the image of God. God is ever present, and we are guided by mosaic tablets with rules for living and playing well with others. Those guidelines were simplified by Jesus, who teaches us the simple way to peace. Love God and love others. It's that simple. Don't do this yesterday. Don't do this tomorrow. Don't do this with ifs and shoulds. Just do it now. I am. We are. Do this in every I am moment, because that's where we have the opportunity to embrace hope and choose peace. to simply want peace, live peace, and share peace. Those are Mattie's 3 choices for peace. As I begin to wrap my remarks up, I would summarize Mattie by saying Mattie is a mosaic. Mattie is a mosaic of interests. He has favorite toys, favorite books of topics, things he liked to chat about, talk about, write about. He's a mosaic of experiences. He had many mountaintop moments. He had many miserable moments, and he had a whole lot of those every single day moments that we all have in our life. Mattie was also a mosaic of spirituality. He embraced Catholicism, God as his creator and gifter of purpose, Jesus as his teacher and savior, and the Holy Spirit as his daily strength. But Mattie also studied other faiths because he wanted to understand so that he could respect other mosaic treasures. He said that is the only way that he would be able to serve as a messenger, to be able to offer a meaningful message of hope and cultivate achievable pathways to peace. I remember at Mattie's funeral and at his wake, I remember even in my grief, I was still in awe. Thousands and thousands of people chose to show up to say, I am here because this kid matters. And when I say mosaic was at his funeral, it's like people diverse in skin color, languages, cultures, abilities, societal status, experiences, connections, people diverse in religion and faith came to a Catholic church. And I remember thinking, and I remember pausing and saying my very first ever prayer to Mattie rather than for Mattie. And I remember saying, Mattie, wow, look at this. This is your mosaic of humanity. You have local and global neighbors who are here to celebrate messages of heart songs and hope, peace, purpose, play, prayer, all in honor of a child, a young man who was almost 14 years of age, who said to the world again and again, I am Mattie J.T. Stepanek. I am not an angel. I am simply a messenger who chooses to serve God and to love and tend to others. I'd like to close my remarks with a poem that Mattie penned on September 11th, 2001. If my audio works, what you're about to hear is an expression of Mattie's personal reflection on how to move forthward from trauma and tragedy. It's not a mere reaction to the horrors of violence, but a purposeful response to questions of what now, what next, after he witnessed in real time both global crisis, but he was also watching several of his close firefighter friends perish in these terrorist attacks. Friends that he had just hugged on September 10th, 2001. In this poem, which Mattie hoped would one day serve as an international passage or a prayer for peace, you'll also hear Mattie's reference to the mosaic of humanity. When I click the slide, I am going to ask somebody to give me a thumbs up if you can hear the audio, and kind of like just let me know, because if it doesn't work, I'm going to play it from my phone and try to roll the slides at the same time.
For our world, we need to stop. Just stop. Stop for a moment before anybody says or does anything that may hurt anyone else. We need to be silent. Just silent. Silent for a moment before we forever lose the blessing of songs that grow in our hearts. We need to notice. Just notice. Notice for a moment before the future slips away into ashes and dust of humility. Stop, be silent, and notice. In so many ways, we are the same. Our differences are unique treasures. We are a mosaic of gifts to nurture, to offer, to accept. We need to be, just be. Be for a moment kind and gentle, innocent and trusting, like children and lambs, never judging or vengeful, like the judging and vengeful. And now let us pray, differently yet together, before there is no earth, no life, no chance for peace. Mattie J.T. Stepanek.
Thank you, Jeni. Would you take 1 minute and share a little bit about Mattie and Robert Ellsberg's book on All Saints?
Yes. So Mattie enjoyed praying at many churches, shrines, cathedrals, monasteries. He just loved praying everywhere. And everywhere he went, he tried to meet new people, learn about parish traditions, explore altars, and of course, visit the libraries at the church. Mattie was a book lover. If you look behind me, this is just a tiny bit of our library. It was either 2001 or 2002. At St. Rose of Lima, he came across a book that you see here, the one that's in the brownish cover. And it was filled with information, inspiration on so many saints that he had never heard of before. Ordinary folks who lived in life in extraordinary ways. And this was a huge inspiration for Mattie, who was making daily choices to live life that was very difficult. Well, he loved this book so much that he kind of kept it for many, many years. Okay, it was at home. He'd go to the hospital. It would be in his little bag. It would stay at the hospital for months on end. He literally read this book every single day at home and in the hospital. And when he passed away several years later in 2004, I begrudgingly, but mommy guilt here, I returned the book to the parish library. But knowing how much Mattie loved it, I went directly to Amazon and ordered a copy of it to put into our library because it was so endearing to Mattie. So that's in 2001 to 2004. Well, a couple of years ago, I got a message from somebody, I believe on the Guild, was either Kathy, Peg, somebody, saying somebody has written a nice article or a little piece about Mattie and his spirituality. And honestly, this was not unusual. A lot of people write about Mattie. A lot of people put him in textbooks and religion books and spiritual things. But when I saw the name, I went, gosh, that name is familiar. And I kept going back to it. Robert Ellsberg, and it wasn't just familiar. It actually was comforting, and I didn't know why. And it took me several weeks before I had my aha moment. And I went, oh my gosh, I think this is the man that wrote the book that Mattie was Mattie's personal Bible. And it turns out it was him. And I was like, oh my gosh, this guy, if Mattie only knew, which I'm sure he does, that this man knows who he is, and that Mattie could tell him how much he appreciated the time you put into telling us about these ordinary people who lived such extraordinary lives that made them saints. And the good news is when Robert reissued his book, the 25th anniversary, he actually shares some thoughts about Mattie in the introduction. And it's beautiful because tonight he's here with us and he can share some of his thoughts personally. So thank you.
Absolutely. So thank you, Jeni. Robert, welcome. On behalf of Mattie, we're all excited that you're here. So tell us about how you came to know Mattie.
Well, as the story was just shared with you, I only learned about Mattie a couple of years ago when I'm not even sure, I'm sure is in the room here. One of you reached out to me because apart from the books that I've written about saints, I also have for many years now, 14 years actually, written a daily reflection called Blessed Among Us for Give Us This Day, which is a prayer resource that's published by Liturgical Press. And they asked me to sort of follow the model of what I did in All Saints, which, as you mentioned, is 365, longer reflections on people I call saints, prophets, and witnesses for our time. And the whole idea behind that was to not confine myself to official canonized saints, but all kinds of people who in some way offer us a kind of window on the love of God. Might be expressed in all different kinds of ways. Some of them live very extraordinary lives and some very ordinary. And especially in Give Us This Day, I have included many more of the not necessarily very famous people, many of them recommended to me. People often, I think it gives them pleasure to open up Give Us This Day and say, oh, she was a member of my community or the founder of my community or something like that. So I'm very open to those kind of suggestions. And someone suggested, that I would like to share with you the story of this little boy, Mattie Stepanek. I'd never heard of him before. And I should say that I tend to be a little shy or skeptical about stories of child saints because I'm a Catholic convert myself, and I just, one of the first things I did was buy a whole set of Butler's Lives of the Saints, and one of my Catholic friends said, "Oh, the only reason you can stand to read those things is you did not grow up on stories of holy child saints who died before they ever had an impure thought." And there's a tendency to think this is going to be, sort of sentimental and pious, and it sort of writes itself. I also, thought it was a challenge to write about a child who went through so much suffering and died at such a young age. But when I read the story, of course, I discovered that he was defied all those kind of stereotypes altogether, so I was extremely taken by his story, and I don't need to share with you or read to you what I wrote because it's only 250 words, and it's nothing that you have not already heard. I have to pause and say what an honor it is to be invited to be part of this group. I knew much less about Mattie than any of the others who will be speaking, and of course Jeni. And I can hardly imagine adding anything to the most extraordinary presentation you just offered, and to think even that hard enough as a mother to lose a child like this, and not the only one, but to think of that a mother so understood the character and nature of her child, and should dedicate herself so faithfully to continuing his mission on earth. Because that's one of the strong messages that I kind of got from reading about Mattie, was this idea that he was not conscious so much that he wanted to be famous or something like that, certainly not to be canonized. Though I'm not discouraging that process, but I mean, that was not his ambition. That's not why he lived or why he wrote these things. But definitely the sense that he had a message to share, and that his short life was a time for him to plant the seeds of consciousness, of a new consciousness. And he did not, there are lots of stories of precocious child saints who, from very early age, say, "I want to be a saint when that's my ambition, is to be a saint," and they're usually modeling themselves against great holy apostles and evangelists and martyrs and founders of religious congregations and that sort of thing. And what really struck me was that Mattie didn't really use that kind of language. He talked about being an ambassador of peace. And I think one of the things that absolutely extraordinary to me is this word heart songs, that at first I was, thought that was sort of just a sentimental kind of way of talking about poems that he wrote or something like that. But then to discover that it had a whole deep kind of metaphysical meaning for him. It was not just these poems that he wrote, but it was a way of talking about his vocation, his purpose for life. And that's one of the things that kind of struck me so remarkably about him, was that, of course, he was a very devoted Catholic, and he loved Jesus and the Blessed Mother and saints and Eucharist. But in talking about him being an ambassador of peace, he didn't just mean being against war or violence, but as Jeni was saying, it was a matter of awakening others to his own sense of the sacredness and preciousness of life, what it means to be made in the image of God, and the possibilities that are available to all of us to be happy, to find the peace that's rooted in our being children of God, to extend that spirit of peace throughout the whole world, beginning with each one of us. This extraordinary sense of purpose. And part of that purpose was to help others see and discover their own purpose. In other words, his heart songs were not just a way of expressing himself, but to make everyone aware that they have their own heart song, and thus to, as I said, to plant kind of seeds that could produce heart songs in others long after his short life. I got to know him better only today, really, when I was reading the book Just Peace, beautiful book, and among the the poems, there are some very deep reflections, and one of them that really struck me was on this this kind of this word heart song. He said, a heart song is an inner message. It's a person's inner beauty and reason for being. A heart song tells you what you were meant to do or be in life. Whatever it is that we feel we need and want the most in life, well, that's what we're called to offer others. That's our heart song. I seek hope and peace. I seek happiness. I seek love around the world. So most of the time, my heart song sings, I love you, how happy you can be, how happy you can make this whole world be. He said, I believe that I'm here to share a message of hope and peace with the world. I believe that I'm here to reach out and touch the world gently with my thoughts and my experiences, and with my observations and my reactions, to help people more fully appreciate and respect all aspects of life. I believe that I'm here, even if only for a few handfuls of years, to help people consider the important matter of future during our lifetime and for eternity. I think it reminded me of the poet, another poet, Gerard Manley Hopkins, English Jesuit poet, who invented a word he called selving, the process of realizing and manifesting our unique and particular vocation. He has a great poem called Kingfishers Catch Fire, where he says, each mortal thing does one thing and the same, deals out that being indoors each one dwells, selves, goes itself, myself it speaks and spells, crying, what I do is me, for this. Mattie had an extraordinary sense of self. And that one thing and the same thing that he did was to awaken others to their own precious sense of self, which is a unique gift to the world. In other words, it's not just self-assertion. It's a gift to share with others. It's a gift to awaken other people to their sense of self, not in sense of ego, but in sense of their identity, as Jeni was saying, as precious children of God, and how different the world would be if we lived out of that consciousness. In the lives of the saints, so many of them are a story of their search for their vocation, what they're meant to do. So many of them have a sense of restlessness in their childhood or their early life, of feeling that they were called to something, some way of living, some way of being, some way of serving God that didn't seem to be provided by the various options available at that time. And so eventually, at some point, they either found it or they had to invent it. And, in the case of many people like Dorothy Day, whom I worked with, I mean, that only took place when she was 35 and started the Catholic Worker. or Mother Teresa, who was a nun for many years. You could say, well, she had found her vocation to be a nun. On many years after being a teacher, when she has this call within a call on a train in the Himalayas, where she feels that God is calling her to leave her convent and go out to the highways and byways to care for the most marginalized, the sick and dying. Mattie seemed to have this sense of vocation from a very young age. And it was not a vocation, that a child might say, well, when I grow up, I want to be a firefighter, or I want to be an astronaut, or I want to be a baseball player. And maybe they even prepare for that in their little league or something like that. Obviously, Mattie was not given to him to imagine realistically growing up, having a long life, a long future. And so his vocation had to be fulfilled and realized now in the moment, a moment that happened to be carries such a weight of suffering, of in and out of the hospital, of being in a wheelchair, of just reading about the terrible things that near-death experiences that he went through. And so, that is also part of his thing, is this living in the face of death, living while dying, but not, as he said, not dying while dying, not dying till death, living until he died. And part of that vocation was making every moment count, every moment an opportunity to welcome the love of God and to reflect that back toward others. There's another poet, William Blake, with a line that I like very much, where he said, "We're put on this earth for a short while, that we may learn to bear the beams of love." And we're all here, relatively speaking, for a short while. Might seem like a long time, might sometimes seem like it goes on forever. But all of it, relatively speaking, it's all a short time. And all of it is given to us under the challenge to learn an important lesson, what it means to bear the beams of love, as Blake said. And that's the other thing, is that lots of people are sick. There are lots of children who go through all kinds of terrible suffering, and not just the suffering of illness, but in war zones, or hunger, or poverty, or abuse. And the way that Mattie had this kind of sense of abandonment to divine providence, obviously, I presume he would have preferred to be healthy and to have a long life. As Martin Luther King said on the night before he died, longevity has its place. We all would like to live a long time. But the main point, whether our lives are long or they're short, to fulfill that deep vocation, calling of what we're put on this earth to do, and the fact that for each of us, it's a different thing. As Jeni was saying, we're all part of this mosaic. It's not to become necessarily like another saint, but to find, not even to be canonized, but to, as I said, to receive God's love, to reflect it back to the world, to learn to bear the beams of love. Mattie fulfilled that purpose. And for those of us who take for granted our lives and the many years we look forward to, he poses a very deep challenge to get started, to live fully in the present, to live generously, to give everything, holding nothing back. I think that was related to something that's also, extraordinary about someone of such a young age. As I said, this deep trust in God. Dag Hammarskjöld, who was Secretary General of the United Nations, who died, many believe, was assassinated in a plane crash during a peace mission in Africa. He was certainly a peacemaker. He was also turned out to be something of a mystic, as was revealed in the diaries he left behind. And in one entry he wrote, "I don't know who or what put the question. I don't know when it was put. I don't even remember answering. But at some moment I did answer yes to someone or something. And from that hour, I was certain that existence is meaningful, and therefore my life in self-surrender had a goal. It's, I think, a repetition of, Mary's fiat, let it be done unto me according to your will. The whole history of salvation is encompassed in that yes. And it's something that's renewed in every act of faith, great or small, and it's reenacted over and over again in the lives of the saints. Certainly in my great mentor, Dorothy Day, whose conversion was prompted by the unexpected but joyful experience of being pregnant. Mattie said, I believe there is something bigger and better than the here and now, where our essence, our spirit lives eternally. And I believe that I'm spending my time on earth trying to do what I feel is my purpose here. I'm trying to be the best me that I can be, selving that I am. And in doing so, I believe that the eternal wonders and glory of what I call heaven will greet me when my body finally stops working. So while I have to admit that I'm afraid of the process of dying, I'm not afraid of being dead. I think of, the Buddhists have this idea of the bodhisattva, who is an awakened one who chooses to remain in the world, even in the world of suffering, in order to serve and awaken others. Or in the Catholic tradition, Saint Therese of Lisieux, who said that she would spend her heaven doing good on earth. The origins of the veneration of saints, tradition of venerating saints, goes all the way back to the early church martyrs during the Roman Empire, who died in the arena, often in terrible ways, painfully, to bear witness to their faith in Christ, in God's promises. But martyr simply means witness. Witness to faith, witness to and trust in God's promises, witness to believe that there's something stronger than death. Because of that, the martyrs were able to endure great suffering, but you don't have to be in a Roman arena to experience suffering. Ordinary life brings loss and suffering to all of us. And in that light, it offers an opportunity to bear witness. And Mattie, in that sense, was a true martyr, not because he died or because he died young, but because of the witness he offered. I know that I've been involved in the guild to promote the canonization of Dorothy Day. I know that there's a Mattie Stepanek Guild, which would be oriented toward the possibility of his canonization. And of course, to be a saint is not the same thing as being canonized. There are saints all around us, little saints with a little s, lowercase s, that many of them, people we know, people who seem to reflect the spirit of the Beatitudes, as Mattie did in every respect, I think. People whose goodness rubs off on us, even just hearing about their witness. I don't know how many of us are really improved by reading books about ethics, but all of us know what it's like to have our hearts stirred by an example of living witness. I know that from my own life, but in reflecting on lives of the saints, studying the stories of the saints, I was very struck by how often a critical turning point in their lives came through their encounter with another saint. Sometimes that was a personal encounter, but often it came from reading a story. The first followers of St. Francis, of course, were attracted by his example of his kind of freedom and joy, and wanted to have the secret of his happiness. But later on, it was people, reading about the life of St. Francis and Franciscan fever kind of swept across Europe. Or I think of St. Ignatius of Loyola, a very famous story, the founder of the Jesuits. He was a courtier and soldier who was wounded terribly in a battle. And while he was recovering, he was in a castle and he had nothing to read except for a book of Lives of the Saints, not really what he wanted to read. But as he began reading about this, he preferred to read about knights and armor and heroism of that kind, battle. He was struck by the idea that there was a different kind of heroism, different kind of valor. And he said he found himself asking himself, what if I should live like St. Dominic? What if I should live like St. Francis? And I've seen that, that story played out very much in my own life. It's everything that I have really learned of importance has come from thinking about and reflecting on the example of great souls, moral heroes, spiritual heroes. And, it's in that spirit that I write these, these stories about the saints. And I began by telling the story about how I happened to write this story about Jeni. And I'm very glad that, the story about Mattie, and I'm very glad that Jeni, that I heard it from her own mouth, because I heard it secondhand, this idea that reading my book, All Saints, had been inspiring to Mattie. And it was a confirmation, dramatizing, my own hope for why I write these books. It's as if Mattie could see all the people who had found and given voice to their own heart songs because of him. In this case, the idea that I would be writing about somebody that I consider a young saint, Mattie Stepanek, whose own witness was nourished in some way by reading stories of saints that I had collected and made available. I can't tell you how meaningful that was to me. And it gave me another just concrete confirmation of why I write these stories, so that, as I wrote in the introduction, at the end of the introduction to this new edition of my book, so that somewhere somebody might read these stories and imagine a different way of living and ask themselves, what if I should live like Mattie Stepanek? Well, thank you for this opportunity to share a few thoughts, and I yield the stage at this point.
Kathy, you're muted.
I think someone has to unmute Kathy. Is that what she's telling us?
Kathy. Hang on. Oh, yes. Hang on. Kathy Dempsey. I've got to find you. I'm so sorry. I don't know how it happened. There you are. Make co-host. All right.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Robert. Thank you very much. That was very inspiring and heartwarming for us to hear your message. And I know Jeni, it means a lot to her too. Jeni, I think we're now ready for you to do a super brief introduction on the poem by Mattie about things that matter, and then we'll play that, and then we'll jump into a Q&A with Meghan.
Okay,
and
may I offer a quick suggestion? Can I move that poem to our closing prayer instead of the one we had picked, since we've already heard it once?
Yep.
We're running late. So go ahead and go straight into what's next. And I'm going to pull that poem and that story. Give me like 5 minutes at the end to set that poem up and to share it.
That sounds excellent. If I could ask you to do one thing while for Meghan and I. Meghan, can you unmute yourself? Excellent. And then Jeni, could you help Mary Donovan unmute herself so that she's ready to go after Meghan?
Okay.
She's having trouble. And while you do that, it is Meghan time. Meghan and I are going to do a little something different. We're going to do a little Q&A. And we are so thankful that Meghan is with us this evening. Meghan, welcome. I know that you have a very active and deep faith life, which I referred to in the introduction. But could you tell us again, remind us again about what ministries you're involved in?
All right, so I'm involved in a lot with my church, with St. Francis of Assisi, Catholic Church. I also let's see here. Oh crap. Sorry. I'm also involved in helping up the youth, getting people involved with upcoming community resources. I'm also a big help in our church communities. I spoke with the Pope. I did the second reading at his mass when he came into town. Let's see here. I just recently got to serve with another Pope, no, with a bishop at a summer camp also as well. I'm an Archdiocese lector and an usher at St. Francis. And do we need to go into the boards?
Well, I know you're on the board of directors for Up County Community Resources, and you're vice chairperson for the Maryland Disabilities Council.
Okay, and there's one other thing that you guys don't know about me.
What?
I am working with Jen Lynn on the IDD, the police department IDD impact board also as well.
Ah, you guys are keeping secrets. I did not know that.
Yes.
Congratulations.
So,
I mean, that's a big deal. That's fantastic. It's going to be a lot of good that you're doing.
and that involves with going out in the community, making sure that people with disabilities like Mattie, helping them navigate streets, making sure what streets are available to them and what the police can do with us as well.
Well, so speaking of Mattie, switching gears a little bit, do you know or remember when you first learned about Mattie or how you first learned about Mattie?
I'm trying to think here because I met his mom since forever now. And I know that's what
she's
my
that
mom
old,
wanted me to
forever.
say too. But anyway, let me go through my notes here.
Or tell me, what did you like about Mattie?
How? Like about Mattie. Okay, here it is. It's not about liking Mattie, but it's to love Mattie. As one and live as one another. It's also about how our differences would be a challenge for us and how he lived for us and how you do not take that for granted. So no matter what we do, no matter how we look, we are just a person. We just want to be treated as one. And that's what Mattie really did for me.
Absolutely. So that's sort of one way that he impacted you, because I know many people living with disabilities have a connection to Mattie, and you have a connection to Mattie. So how else did he impact your life? How else does he impact your life?
So, okay, so I had a dream. I don't want to say I was sleeping. The word Mattie in my life is how he came down to me as I was praying. And this is really beautiful because he's been in my head multiple times, no matter what. he will always say yes. You have to say yes, big and loud, no matter who you are, no matter how big the question is. Say yes to the word. Say yes that you want to be invited to an event. Say yes to this webinar. Say yes. And that has been a real impact in my life.
Just like Monsignor Ensler, right? Say yes.
You
Well,
have to say yes.
you have to say yes. Is there an additional way where Mattie impacts your faith life?
So the faith, Mattie's always been a good person. I would say Mattie has been a saint. He's been a wonderful son to Jeni. He's always coming down and say, Meghan, say hi to my mom, say hi, and say I love you to my mom to make sure that she's okay. And when I go to church, and that's what I've been hearing almost every single Sunday, I go to church, like I'm going this Sunday because I have to serve Mass. He would come down to me. He would say, Meghan, you've been a good person. You've been a great and wonderful person to my mother. You have been the joy in my life. Continue my legacy. And that's what he said to me every Sunday that I go to church.
Wow. Meghan, that is so beautiful.
Mhm.
I think we're all a little speechless, and I really feel sorry for Mary. Meghan, thank you very much. Is there anything else you want to say?
I think that's it.
That is beautiful. Thank you very much. Hang tight if you can, so we can do some Q&A at the end here once we hear from Mary.
Mhm.
And Mary, you're up.
Good evening, everyone. After three such eloquent speakers, you said you felt sorry for me. So I feel sorry for me right now. But yet I am lucky enough to share the way Mattie has touched children and how he has been a role model to children. And I'm going to abbreviate my remarks a little because I know you want to get to that Q&A. But I was lucky enough to have known Mattie. And we met when Jeni joined our choir, and Mattie and my daughters used to play together while my husband and I and Jeni and the other choir members rehearsed for Mass. So I first got to know Mattie as an ordinary kid. He was a playmate of my children. He was interested in the same things they were interested in. And Jeni, when I was listening to you, the words you talked about him being ordinary and typical were the same words I had, almost word for word, except for his interests, I put down martial arts, Pokemon cards, practical jokes, Harry Potter. I'm in Boston. I've got my accent back, and the Lord of the Rings. So, all those things were part of his being an ordinary kid, but he was extraordinary, deeply spiritual, highly intelligent. And so when I would share about Mattie with my students when I was teaching, it was like the ordinary about Mattie let them in the door. They could relate to him. And then the extraordinary things about Mattie inspired him. So he was an amazing mixture of both. What I noticed when I shared about Mattie with my students is they were moved by all the challenges Mattie had to face. And we've gone over many of these already. He lived with his life-threatening illness from birth. He dealt with the deaths of his siblings, mom's illness, divorce, economic difficulties, hospitalizations, bullying, and just being different from everyone else. Every child faces challenges, but it's unusual to face so many. But then after being touched and moved and distressed by all those, the students found that he found solace and comfort in his faith in God and in the sacraments. That was how he coped. And they learned they learned some of this through his poetry. He felt called to share his heart songs, and they were encouraged and given hope to face their own challenges. Now, as we've said, this is the 20th anniversary year of Mattie's death, and today's children are not growing up seeing Mattie on Oprah or excitedly rushing out to buy his books of poetry as they're being published. So the Guild has said, how can we introduce Mattie to this new generation of children? And we've been invited into archdiocesan schools to do presentations. We've talked about Mattie's life. We share some of his poetry. We usually do a project where we ask the students to think about their own heart songs and write them on a little paper heart. And as we all know, Mattie believed everyone had a heart song. And it was really delightful to watch the students at all different ages responding to that. What a kindergartner's heart song is going to be very different from a 7th or 8th grader's. And we talked about how our heart songs change over time, excuse me. And they expressed their heart songs in ways that were age appropriate and also appropriate to their best style of creativity. So sometimes it would be a picture or a drawing or a painting or some other kind of art. Sometimes a single word like friend or sister. And older students would write paragraphs or even pages about their heart songs. And some students chose to write their own poetry because they were inspired by Mattie. Another way the Guild has reached out to share Mattie as a role model is through the Virtues curriculum written by our wonderful Guild member, Caitlin Keaton, an Archdiocese of Washington school principal. And it's not intended to replace any curriculum standards, but to enhance them. And what she wrote is she features a virtue per month and incorporates Mattie's poetry, elements and stories from his life, biblical passages, and examples found in literature to illustrate the virtue and how to live it. And after creating this amazing document, she just emailed it to all the principals in the Archdiocese. You're free to use this if you feel it would enhance your curriculum and the life of your students. And it has been really fun to see how some individual students, as well as some entire schools, have embraced the curriculum and are using it to incorporate the virtues into the day-to-day life of their classrooms and schools. And it's fun to see the different ways they do this. Some have chosen to teach the lessons in assemblies, whole school assemblies, introduce the virtue of the month, have a big kickoff. Others use bulletin boards. Sometimes they try to catch students exhibiting the virtue of the month. They've incorporated the virtues into morning prayers, all kinds of things. Some schools have had awards for students displaying the virtues. One school had a Mattie Stepanek Virtues tree, which started off very simple at the beginning of the year, but as students illustrated or demonstrated the virtue, they were put on the tree in a bird's nest, and the nests filled, and then the birds would fly away, and those birds would hang from different places. So at the beginning of the year, there's nothing, and by the end of the year, they had all kinds of birds and students' names and virtues as they showed how they had learned about these throughout the year. And the virtues included in the curriculum are kindness, courage, gratitude, generosity, forgiveness, temperance, humility, hope, fortitude, charity, faith, peace and justice, prudence, and wisdom. And when the students saw someone their age, someone they could relate to, striving to live a virtuous life, it became a very powerful lesson. So I reached out to some teachers who worked with this curriculum to see how did the students react to learning about Mattie as a role model. And here are some of the things they shared with me. One was that the students were very ready and eager to receive his message. They understood what he was trying to communicate because it was on their level. Some were excited to find out he loved the same thing they loved, like going to camp or reading Harry Potter. Others had different interests, but seeing that he also had childlike interests, felt that he was just like them. A lot of students apparently really saw the virtue of courage in the way Mattie faced his many challenges. And one of my absolute favorite comments was a little girl told her teacher she was brave and had courage like Mattie because she went down the big slide. And when you're 5, the big slide takes a lot of courage. And when you're 65, there are things that take a lot of courage. So Mattie is an example to us all, but I just loved that. One student asked the teacher, why wasn't Mattie angry all the time because of all these challenges? And the teacher said this led to a beautiful discussion of how prayer can help us deal with our anger. Another teacher explained that the students related more easily to Mattie because he was a child himself. Many of the saints that we study, that Mattie studied in that wonderful book about the saints, it certainly has value, but they really enjoyed hearing about someone their age who could exemplify those virtues, and they were inspired to try to do the same. He lived in modern times, and there are videos that make him very accessible. One teacher said that when she started showing some of the videos, some of her older students started doing their own research about Mattie and his life, that he really came to life for them in the videos. A junior high student at one school expressed a desire to become a priest, and he said he used Mattie as someone he would like to be like, as an example of faith. And I told you about the tree already. I was going to go over that a little more, but I know we're short for time, so I'm going to skip to remarks given by Kelly Brannaman, Superintendent of Schools for the Archdiocese of Washington, that she included in our program for the 20th anniversary Memorial Mass celebrated for Mattie this past June. And she said in part, schools across the Catholic Archdiocese of Washington have used Mattie's virtues curriculum, integrating the virtues into student instruction, school expectations, and family partnerships. I am pleased the schools also prioritize the Guild when considering organizations to support. On the occasion of the 20th anniversary Memorial Mass, I remain grateful to the Mattie J.T. Stepanek Guild and the continued inspiration Mattie provides to our educators and students. And we are so grateful for Superintendent Brannaman's support of our efforts and welcoming us into the schools. And what I would say to her, thanks, is to say it's our privilege as members of the Guild and our pleasure to share the life, faith, and virtuous example of Mattie.
Thank you, Mary.
And we hope
Thank
to
you.
continue to do it.
Thank you very much. Now I think we're going to go straight into our Q&A. And if anyone has any questions, we can unmute you. You can put a question in the chat, and we can just take a few questions and see how it goes. I see Faith. I don't know if you have any questions, sweetheart. Hi there. And I have something that someone texted me a few minutes ago, actually. And Megan, this one is for you. Could you tell us about a project that you're working on with the Archdiocese of Washington?
So, so me and Lisa Chung have been combined together for Martha and Mary's Kitchen. And with that is with the Archdiocese of Washington. We got some seed money also as well to keep that program going. So we get together every Thursday and we came and we talked about faith, one on what we're going to be learning from the church, and then we cook. So I teach cooking also as well. So my dad's a teacher for one thing, and I'm taking a little piece of him from this. So I teach the cooking session, and I can say this fall we are doing a Mattie themed for this session, and I got approved from Jeni to
Mhm.
actually can do that. Her son inspired us to continue that legacy of him. I got his favorite foods also as well from Jeni as we had dinner before I left. So if you guys interested, just let me know.
Excellent. We definitely will do that. Thank you very much, and for all the good that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Martha and Mary's Kitchen.
Yes.
Do we have any other questions? What virtue of Mattie's jumps out to anybody?
I have given people permission to unmute and show their videos, so you just need to turn yourself on if you want to share.
Faith is raising her hand.
And so is David. Next.
Faith, can you unmute?
Yeah.
Oh, do it one more time.
Hello. Mattie, help me see I fit perfectly in the mosaic of your world. Sometimes it's hard for me to get my words out. But like Mattie says, my words matter. We all matter.
100%. Thank you, Faith. David, did you have a question?
I do. I believe that Mattie is a great example for all of us to keep our dreams and goals and keep perseverance on those goals. And he gave us that example for all of us that if we just keep pushing ourselves, we can do it. I have the gift of music, and through music, I have touched the lives of many people, and I will continue spreading the message of Mattie about love and kindness to everyone. And I'm so grateful to meet Jeni, a wonderful friend, and continue spreading the message of peace.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We could take one more question. I know we're going to go over a tad, but one more question before we close with Mattie. All good? All right. So we're going to forget all the awesome things I was going to talk about in the close. And we're going to go straight to the more important thing, which is we will go ahead and just have Mattie close us out. So Jeni, what do you have for us?
I've got one thinks, one's never sure. All right, so here we go. So you had mentioned the prayer basket. So we are going to put that slide up. So if people want to put a prayer, we can also put this in the chat box. And a reminder that Peace Day, we celebrate Mattie's birthday in July, but it was 106 degrees that day, so we've postponed it. It's now September. We hope it's not 106 degrees, but check our website and social media for that. I want to close with a poem that Mattie wrote, and I want to introduce the poem because it matters that you understand where this poem came from. So, as you know, Mattie is born. He came into the world with this condition that was not compatible with life. And the first year or two of his life, he was critically ill and nobody thought he was going to survive. By the time he was a toddler, he was miraculously stabilizing. He was never without equipment, never without machines, never without medicines and scares. But he spent kind of ages 2 or 3 to about 10, where he was a kid with a life-threatening condition, living a normal life. All that changed when he was 10 years old. When he was 10 years old, he went into a coma. He survived that coma. They didn't think he was going to. He came out of the coma. He was in the hospital for months and months, and they were ready to send him home. And literally overnight, something devastating went wrong. And they did a last-ditch procedure late spring 2001 to see if there was any hope for his survival. And basically what we found out is that he was no longer a child with a life-threatening condition. He was a child who was dying from his disability. The doctors told me and Mattie that he likely had about 3 days, possibly 3 weeks left on Earth. But he did not have 3 months. I will reassure you, he actually had 3 years almost to the day from the time they said it. So they were wrong. But he also believed he got a miracle from Andre Bessette. But at any rate, you have this 10-year-old kid who is very, very smart. He's taking college courses. He's finishing high school. He's, writing all these books of poetry. But he's also 10 years old. He sleeps with Mr. Bunny. He doesn't want to leave his mommy. He doesn't want to leave this world. Well, his child life social worker was in there with him, and she said, Mattie, how do you feel hearing this news? And I want to say that Mattie's, and this is etched in my brain, Mattie's immediate response was, if I have any breath to complain about anything, I have more than enough reason to give thanks about something. And I'm sitting there thinking, not that, okay? Like, not that, okay? And it just impressed me that Terry Spearman, as child life specialist, said, Mattie, I have a recorder here, and I'd like to record what matters to you in this moment, so that in future moments, it might matter to someone else. And I want to share exactly what Mattie shared in that moment and hope that it matters to you all now.
About things that matter. It matters that the world knows we must celebrate the gift of life every day in some way, and we must always remember to play after every storm. It matters that the world knows all children are truly blessed with the innocent gifts of gentleness, trust, and compassion, which should guide the wisdom of grown-ups. It matters that the world knows we each have a song in our heart that can inspire us in good times and hard times if we take the time to listen. It matters that the world knows our senses can help us discover the hidden and non-hidden enchantment in life if we use them fully. It matters that the world knows we must choose our words and wants carefully, or we could forever hurt others with these most dangerous weapons. It matters that the world knows strength and value of all things created must be measured by a character and commitment rather than by might and wealth. It matters that the whole world knows we must heed the valuable lessons of everyday life through the celebration of children and heart songs, senses, and words, or we could lose in our journey to the future. It matters that the world knows a person by my name and being, existed with a strong spirit and an eternal mindset to become a peacemaker for all by sharing the things that really matter. June 2001.
Thank you, Jeni. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Meghan. Thanks to all the guests who hung around for us and with us. And we'll get this recording out there. Please share it and stay in touch. God bless. Bye-bye.
Eternal roll call. I will paint rainbows when the spring comes, and children will dance and smile in the music of my colors. I will shape clouds when the summer comes, and children will chant and dream in the melody of my creations. I will whistle winds when the fall comes, and children will listen and hum in the understanding of leaves. I will jingle stars when the winter comes, and children will laugh and believe in the ballads of the season. I will revolve seasonally when my death comes, and children will remember and share their heart songs, celebrating the gifts in the circle of life. January 2002.